Joining us right now with a technical look at the market is Katie Stockton. She's Fairlead Strategies founder and a CNBC contributor. And Katie, what do you think? 6,300, closing above that, but it's been a pretty steady march higher for these markets. People wondering if they're overbought or if you think this momentum continues.
Yeah, I would even argue that it's been remarkably strong. I mean, we've had barely a pullback since May into June. And I think things changed towards late June when we saw this gap up, and then we saw a bit of a melt up into the end of the second quarter. And that's when we saw breakouts start to unfold. And breakouts are something that tend to foster additional upside momentum. We did see a breakout by the S&P 500. It confirmed that breakout, meaning it held above there for a couple of weeks. And that breakout allows for a pretty impressive measured move objective of about 68.80. That would be not relevant likely for this year.
Not by the end of this year. Then.
Yeah, it would be more of a 2026 type of objective based on the current trajectory of the trend. Now, you have to imagine it's not going to be a straight path up to that point. And I will say that, there are overbought indications. So far, those indications haven't been all that meaningful. And the loss of momentum that we have seen, especially relative to the early stages of the move off the April low, has just really not made a difference, right? So there just feels like this underlying bid to the market. What I think could change that, and only temporarily because we have the breakout confirmed, are mega cap earnings, right? So these mega cap stocks are coming into earnings really, I'd say, coming in hot, right? They have very strong upside momentum for the most part and look pretty overstretched. And so that creates, in my opinion, more of a proof point for them as they come into those reports.
Meaning you better hit your numbers and say something the street likes, otherwise you could see a sell-off?
That's right. And honestly, a sell-off would be pretty healthy in the big scheme of things because it presses the reset button on the uptrends.
So you would feel better if there was actually a reset?
I think so, because it helps the trend not get too steep. Because what happens when you get a very steep uptrend, and arguably we're getting kind of close to that, is that the way it's sort of resolved is in pretty dramatic fashion. So we want sort of that orderly stair-stepping higher. And that would suggest that we could use a pullback to sort of normalize the slope of the uptrend. We have some indications of that, but they're moderated by the fact that there are so many breakouts and there is a breakout in breadth, meaning that we've seen rotation, even though the mega caps have been quite strong, we have seen rotation that's benefited other sectors of the market.
The sell-off that we're watching, if you look back to April, that was the day that Trump came out and announced the tariffs, and it caught the market off guard. I think since then, the market has figured, look, this is a negotiation. This is part of the art of the deal. We may see higher tariffs, but it's not going to be the highest numbers as advertised. And I realize you're a technician, not somebody who's looking at the headlines that come out along these ways, but how do you take those headlines and try and figure out what it means from a technical perspective?
It's a really interesting tape in that regard, in that there's top-down headline risk. It used to be that it just was individual sort of company headlines that we worried about. Now we have something much bigger than that. So I do care, of course. And it seems like August 1st is sort of a date with the tariff headlines that could change things. So we have these dates in mind. We can't predict it, of course. We can only react to it. So if we did see some kind of volatility-producing event, we will then judge the impact on our indicators, which right now are sort of more neutral short-term and have whipsawed more positive longer-term. If that changes, we're very willing to change with it. And that would, of course, be likely a response of the sentiment and its response to the tariffs.
Dare I ask you about crypto?
We have a breakout there as well. So we finally confirmed the breakout by Bitcoin above about 108,000. And that allowed for a pretty conservative measured move objective of 134, 135. Seems very reasonable based on the volatility that we've seen historically for Bitcoin. But what's interesting about this rally is that it has really expanded to the altcoins in a pretty meaningful way. And they had been previously out of favor in consolidation phases. And Ether, not only Ether, but names like Solana, these breakouts look pretty compelling to me, almost even more so than Bitcoin at this time, sort of a risk-on move.
What's the upside? If you look at Ether, for example, we had a fellow on yesterday who's actually building an entire company around an Ether, almost treasury-like leveraged
heard a
vehicle.
number of them, but they all want to be like the micro strategy of Ether.
Right. And so for Ether, the resistance is around 4,000, and it's a pretty big level. These are massive, wide ranges in the altcoins. So if they do resolve to the upside, I think that would be a pretty major development within the cryptocurrency market. But it shows a spreading out, a breadth, if you will, within that space that is compelling. For Bitcoin, I'd still love to see some consolidation. It has a propensity to stair-step higher. So usually you're well served to wait for that consolidation.
Can I ask you very quickly about the dollar? We're about out of time, but
of course,
that's been one people have watched so
closely.
The
downtrend has kept hold, right? But it watched the dollar index against its 50-day moving average. If we were to see that cleared somewhat meaningfully, it would feel like we have at least a period of dollar strength in store. But for now, we want to respect the fact that that 50-day moving average and resistance is still intact, and that the longer-term momentum is still to the downside, even though it's a little bit less so than it was previously.